Hey guys, tonight we're plunging headfirst into a time that smells worse than your gym locker after a heat wave and feels like a full-bodied medieval escape room with no escape. Yep, we're going to see why you, a modern marvel of soft beds, indoor plumbing, and 5-minute grocery delivery, probably wouldn't survive even one day in the Middle Ages. The straw mattress beneath you is damp. The ceiling leaks. And what's that crawling on your leg? It's either a flea, a rat, or both. Welcome to your bedroom. Actually just a dark single-room cottage with no chimney and about the same airflow as a closed lunchbox. There's no such thing as sleep hygiene, only smoke inhalation from last night's fire and the aroma of the chamber pot next to your head. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink awake to the sound of your neighbor loudly spitting into a bucket. The sun's barely up, but the church bell is already tolling like it's trying to summon the dead, or at least motivate the half-dead to start their chores. You groan and sit up, immediately feeling the stiff ache in your back. No orthopedic mattress here, just straw stuffed in a linen sack, maybe a few insects who've made it their summer home. The floor is dirt, not dirty, dirt. There's no separation between inside and outside, except a poorly fitted wooden door that creaks worse than your knees after sleeping at a weird angle. The single window is unglazed, so wind, bugs, and suspicious smells waft in freely. And don't even think about a bathroom break. Your toilet is a hole in the backyard, or a bucket you empty once a day. Usually. You slip your feet into wooden clogs, splinters be damned, and nearly trip over a chicken that wandered in during the night. That's right, animals live with you. Their warmth, food sources, and occasionally impromptu alarm clocks. Outside, the morning stench hits you like a trebuchet. Manure, smoke, and the unmistakable sourness of too many unwashed bodies. It's not that people don't bathe, more on that soon, but water's precious and soap is either homemade or astronomically priced. Historians still argue whether personal hygiene was as bad as records suggest, but judging by the grime under your fingernails, it's not looking good. A passing cart splashes something suspiciously wet onto your trousers. Was it rainwater? Was it animal waste? The mystery is part of the fun. You glance up the road where the local lord's manor looms in smug splendor. His chimneys smoke cheerily, his walls are dry, and his pigs probably have more square footage than your family of 6. But don't get too jealous, you'll be helping repair his moat next week after finishing your taxes and delivering half your harvest. Yay, feudalism! Back inside, your mother, or wife, or neighbor, depending on what part of Europe you're in, is already stoking the hearth for breakfast. You get stale rye bread and a sip of thin ale. Yes, ale. Water's risky, and boiling it every time is too much effort. You've already accepted that everything either makes you drunk or sick, sometimes both. A banging noise startles you, the village crier yelling out something about a missing goat, an upcoming church fast, and the local stocks being freshly scrubbed. He's the closest thing to Twitter here, only louder and with worse grammar. You stretch, step outside, and catch a glimpse of yourself in a puddle. You look tired, ragged, and like you've been through a war, because just waking up here is a small war. The idea of a slow morning doesn't exist. Your medieval day starts early, starts hard, and absolutely does not care about your mental health. There's no concept of weekends either. Sunday is for worship, and maybe fear of damnation, and every other day is just the day you work until your fingers bleed. Someone calls your name. You've been drafted for woodcutting duty. Of course you have. Before you go, you do one final check. Pouch for coins, empty, knife for safety, dull, and a tiny scrap of cloth with the saint's face on it. Superstitions are your only insurance. If the dirt doesn't get you, maybe the demons will. Still think you're cut out for medieval life? You step outside, stomach half empty and optimism completely missing. Time for breakfast, or whatever passes for it. You're hoping for eggs, maybe cheese, but unless you've bribed the hens with poetry, you're getting neither. The morning meal in medieval Europe is famously uninspiring. A hunk of day-old bread so hard it could double as a self-defense weapon, and a mug of ale thin enough to be mistaken for dirty water, which, to be fair, is still safer than the actual water. The bread is dark, coarse, and baked several days ago. It's made with rye or barley. Wheat is for the upper class, and is probably riddled with ergot, a hallucinogenic fungus that thrives on grain. Fun fact, ergot poisoning may have contributed to those possessed villagers who danced until they died. But sure, let's call this organic. There's no butter. Butter's expensive and reserved for feast days. You might get some animal fat spread if you're lucky or unlucky, depending on how your stomach handles it. If someone in your family is really pushing the boat out, they might offer you a bit of pottage. Think lumpy gray oatmeal without any of the joy. The ale, at least, is fresh. That's relative, of course. It was probably brewed yesterday by your cousin's cousin in a wooden vat that's been reused for everything from fermenting hops to soaking feet. But it's low in alcohol, which means kids drink it too. Imagine that. Little Timmy starts his day with a buzz and a toothless grin. You glance at your neighbor, who just pulled a worm out of his bread and shrugged. Standard. Historians still argue whether the medieval diet was nutritionally better than ours. Some claim peasants had access to more whole grains and fewer processed foods. Others point out that nobody had teeth past 30, so maybe let's not romanticize the wormy carbs. Food safety regulations are fictional as dragons. No refrigeration, no hand-washing signs, and no clue how botulism works. That smoked fish you're eyeing has been hanging in the sun for 3 days, and the cheese smells like it's plotting your death. Still, it's all you've got, unless you're planning on stealing from the Lord's storehouse, in which case, good luck surviving that trial. Breakfast is eaten standing up, or squatting outside, or sometimes not at all. There are no meal times, only work breaks that occasionally involve chewing. Your table is a plank of wood balanced on barrels. Your napkin is your sleeve, and your portion control is a hungry older brother. The cook in your house, a relative, a servant, or just whoever lost the morning argument, uses pots blackened with soot, and there's no chimney, so the entire cottage smells like burnt meat, wet moss, and depression. If someone in the family coughs, it might be from smoke inhalation, or tuberculosis, or both. And then there's salt, that precious, gritty miracle. So rare and expensive it's literally used as money. If your breakfast includes anything salted, meat, eggs, or even herring, you're doing unnaturally well. But odds are your salted food is just fish that was buried under coarse salt weeks ago and now tastes like fishy rocks. Still, better than raw poultry, though. Salmonella hasn't been discovered yet, but it's definitely busy making house calls. You eye the fire and wonder whether it's worth trying to toast your bread. But you remember the last time you got too close. One sleeve caught fire, your dog ran away with the rest of the loaf, and your eyebrows took 2 weeks to grow back. You eat it cold. Outside, a traveling peddler yells about spices from the east, which are actually sawdust mixed with powdered flowers, and you're briefly jealous of nobles with their cinnamon and saffron. Just a pinch of pepper could hide the fact that this meat smells like regret. But spices cost more than your family earns in a month, so instead you chew slowly and hope your nose stops working mid-bite. Meanwhile, breakfast for a nobleman means roasted pork, white bread, yes, white, honeycomb, and wine, served by candlelight, even at sunrise. He has a tablecloth, he has servants, he probably has a bard gently playing the lute while he dips roasted quail into gooseberry sauce. You have moldy crust and a dream. To be clear, nobility doesn't equal safety. Overindulgence is a problem. Gout runs rampant. King Henry VIII basically invented buffet-related cardiac arrest, but still, we'd all take gout over a tapeworm from raw goat liver. And don't even think about coffee. No one in medieval Europe has discovered it yet. Tea, if it exists in your region, is weak and herbal. And sugar? That's basically unicorn dust, so rare and expensive that it's locked in chests and rationed like treasure. Your breakfast sweetness comes from boiled fruit or dried apples if you're lucky enough to have an orchard. The breakfast routine ends abruptly when someone yells from outside that the fields won't plow themselves. Your meal is over in 5 minutes, and your hunger is only slightly dulled. But at least you're not poisoned today. You brush crumbs from your lap, sling a cloth sack over your shoulder, and step back into the muddy path toward another brutal workday, still chewing and hoping the bread doesn't fight back. One bite in, your tooth cracks on something hard. Yep, that's a pebble baked right in. Good morning, medieval you. You trudge toward the fields, jaw still sore from breakfast, and already you're sweating. It's not even mid-morning, but the sun is relentless. There's no sunscreen unless you count wearing a hood or slathering yourself with goose fat and mud, which some peasants do. A few historical records even mention using crushed plant extracts, or in one bizarre case, crocodile dung. Yes, really, medieval skincare wasn't just minimal, it was deeply committed to making your pores fear for their lives. Your clothes don't help. You're dressed in layers of wool because that's what's available, and linen if your family can afford it. Nothing is color fast. Everything itches. The shirt is laced with a twine that cuts into your skin, and your trousers are held up by a rope that doubles as a torture device by noon. The dirt road beneath your feet is actually more like a half-dried swamp, thanks to the pigs who roam freely, the occasional rain, and centuries of poor drainage. You slide more than you walk, and you nearly lose a shoe in the muck. Not that your shoes are worth saving, they're wooden soles tied to your feet with stiff leather, and the blisters they've caused could qualify for sainthood. At the edge of the village, someone hands you a tool, a hoe, maybe a sickle. Doesn't matter. They're all heavy, rusty, and designed to give you calluses and creative new places. There's no break time, no lunch bell, just endless rows of soil and the distant, ever-watchful gaze of your landlord's steward, who shows up only to collect barley, berate your technique, or occasionally insult your parentage. Farming isn't seasonal, it's constant. Even in winter, you're mending tools, slaughtering livestock, or hauling firewood. But in summer, it's full throttle. You dig, sow, weed, reap, thresh, and winnow, and then do it all again. You don't own the land, but you owe a third of your harvest to the Lord, another share to the church, and a few gifts to random officials who just happen to be passing by. And God forbid you fall behind. There's no such thing as a sick day. Got the plague? Just bleed on the crops, I guess. Sprained your wrist? Tie it to a stick and keep swinging. Your neighbor, William, once passed out in the cabbage patch and woke up being pecked by geese. Nobody stopped working. They just farmed around him. To make things worse, the tools barely help. Iron is expensive and prone to rust, and most blades are passed down like heirlooms, meaning they're as sharp as a butter knife and twice as cursed. You've been using the same spade since before you were born. It's probably older than your hut. The sun climbs higher. Your mouth is dry. You could drink from the nearby stream, but so could the cows, and the pigs, and the people washing clothes. You weigh your options, thirst or dysentery. By midday, your back is on fire. You're hunched, burned, and slightly delirious from dehydration. But hey, at least you're not alone. The entire village is out here with you. Men, women, children. Yes, even the kids. Historians still argue whether children were allowed a real childhood, but by the look of that 8-year-old swinging a scythe like a champ, it's safe to say medieval kids weren't exactly sipping juice boxes in a sandbox. There's a commotion near the forest. A tax collector's wagon has arrived, flanked by guards in mismatched armor and expressions that scream, "deeply underpaid." Everyone freezes. This guy's here for his share of your barley, your eggs, and probably your dignity. You wipe your face and approach with the rest. Coins are rare. Your taxes are paid in goods. You offer up a portion of your harvest, which leaves your family dangerously short. But protest too much, and you might get fined, or worse, accused of hoarding. You've heard stories of whole families punished for disloyalty. Sometimes they just disappear. Other times they're relocated to poorer land with rocks instead of soil. Once the wagon leaves, so does the last shred of your motivation. But you can't stop. Afternoon means cleaning tools, feeding animals, maybe repairing the cottage wall that collapsed last night when a goat sneezed too hard. And it's not just crops. You're expected to build roads, ditch ditches, and maintain fences for free. That's called corval labor, and it's as thankless as it sounds. Nobles claim it builds community spirit. You're pretty sure it builds resentment and lifelong knee problems. Your hands are bleeding. Blisters have ruptured. You find a rag and wrap it tight. No antiseptic, no bandage, just good old dirt-to-blood contact. You'll be lucky if it doesn't get infected. But who has time for gangrene when there's barley to thresh? You stop for a moment and glance at the castle on the hill. The lord is probably inside, dining on sweet wine and roasted boar. He might be composing poetry or arguing over falconry rules. He's never even met you, but he owns your land, your labor, and a chunk of your soul. The sun begins to dip. You limp back toward home, soaked in sweat, reeking of manure, and thinking about the bread crust that's probably waiting for dinner. You did a full day's labor under threat of starvation, with tools older than your ancestors, in shoes that double as medieval foot traps. And it's only Tuesday. You finally stagger home, hoping to scrub off the day's grime. But remember, bathing is not exactly on the daily agenda. In fact, you probably had your last proper bath a month ago, and even that was a luxury. You share a wooden tub with your entire household, and the bathwater goes in order of seniority. If you're not the first one in, you're basically stewing in a broth of everyone else's medieval mistakes. The concept of cleanliness in your time is less about hygiene and more about religious symbolism. Washing your hands and face is seen as a sign of moral purity, not bacteria removal. Germ theory hasn't been invented yet. Heck, neither has the idea of microscopic anything. If you get sick, it's either your bad morals, bad blood, or bad luck. Probably all three. The village has one well, but getting water is a full-body workout, and the water's just as likely to give you intestinal drama as it is to quench your thirst. There's a stream nearby, but upstream is where the tanner dumps his chemicals, and the washerwomen beat clothes into submission. So yeah, refreshing. So, how do you clean yourself? Sparingly. You might rinse your face with cold water from a wooden bowl. You scrub your hands with sand or ashes if you're fancy. Soap exists, sort of, but it's harsh, smells like rendered goat, and leaves you drier than a monk's sermon. The rich have scented oils. You have mint leaves if you're lucky, and pig lard if you're not. And privacy? Forget it. There are no bathrooms in your house. You do your business in a chamber pot that gets dumped outside, usually from the second floor. Ever heard the phrase, "Gardy Lou"? That's what people in some cities shout before they toss waste into the street. It's French for "watch out for the loo." Spoiler, people don't always shout. Your hair is tangled from weeks of neglect. You find a knit, then another, then 5. Lice are so common they're just accepted as roommates. Monks shave their heads not for cleanliness, but because it's holy. You're tempted to join them just to avoid the scratching. Some households keep rosemary or lavender to mask odors. Others just embrace the stank. Natural scent, they say, though it's more like eau de compost. You might carry a pomander, a little ball of herbs or resin to sniff when the smell of the street becomes overwhelming. It's the medieval version of a travel-sized air freshener, but even that's reserved for wealthier folks or clergy. Historians still debate whether medieval folks truly hated bathing or simply didn't have time, clean water, or the facilities. Public bathhouses did exist, especially in early medieval towns, but they were eventually discouraged by the church, who worried they encouraged immoral behavior. Because of course they did. Clean bodies, sinful thoughts, right? The irony is that bathhouses were often mixed gender. Yep. In certain centuries and regions, men and women soaked together, until someone inevitably ruined it by turning the bathhouse into the neighborhood's unofficial hookup spot. Cue the church banning everything. You head outside to the wash trough, hoping to splash some water on your face. It's already been used to clean vegetables and possibly a pig, but it'll have to do. You scrub your arms, splash your neck, and dry off with a scratchy cloth that used to be part of someone's tunic. It smells faintly of onions. Your skin is dry and cracked from the wind and the work. No moisturizer here, unless you count the leftover grease from dinner, which some people actually do rub on their hands. Is it disgusting? Yes. Is it effective? Unfortunately, also yes. Your nails are blackened with soil. You bite one without thinking and immediately regret it. Tetanus, anyone? Inside the cottage, the hearth glows low. The air is thick with smoke. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof and a prayer that it doesn't rain. You sit by the fire and try to warm your aching feet. You notice your neighbor's kid scratching at her arm. Scabies again. The local remedy is a poultice made from sheep dung and old bread. You smile politely and edge away. Your clothes, wool tunic, coarse undergarments, hose that sag around the knees, haven't been washed in weeks. Laundry day involves boiling everything in a cauldron with lye soap and pounding it with a stick. It's so much effort that most people only wash their clothes once a season, maybe. A rat skitters across the floor and disappears under a pile of rushes. You try not to think about how many rats live in the walls. You also try not to think about the fleas, or the fact that those two are best friends when it comes to spreading the plague. There's no toothpaste. If you're lucky, you have a stick of licorice root to chew. Or maybe you rub your teeth with salt and cloth. Your breath smells like ale, onions, and despair. Toothaches are common, and dental care consists of tying a string around the tooth and yanking, or visiting the barber, who also does minor surgery, bloodletting, and casual bone setting. Very much a one-stop medieval shop. You finally give up on the idea of feeling clean. You wrap yourself in a wool blanket and try to ignore the itch on your scalp, and your arm, and your other arm. One last splash of water to your face, and it's time to accept the truth. In the medieval world, cleanliness isn't next to godliness, it's next to impossible. You wake up the next morning, still itchy, still sore, still smelling like someone slow-roasted you over a dung fire. But today, you decide to at least attempt something called dressing yourself like a respectable member of society. That is, if respectable means layered in discomfort and creatively crawling with parasites. You begin with your undertunic, which was once white, but now looks like it lost a brawl with a mud pit. It's made of linen, if your family has means, or a cheaper, scratchier wool if they don't. Over that, you pull on a second tunic, because one layer of discomfort is never enough, right? Then come the hose, tight-fitting wool leg coverings that stretch from ankle to thigh and fasten with a kind of medieval garter belt. Except it's just cords tied awkwardly around your hips, cutting off circulation in a way that feels oddly personal. Historians still argue whether people wore underpants beneath their hose. You try it both ways and realize that neither option is a win. Next, your belt. It holds your knife, for work, not fashion, your pouch, empty, and occasionally a lucky charm, like a carved bone, a dried flower, or a dead beetle on a string. Hey, you take comfort where you can. You step into your shoes, or rather slide your feet into something that looks like a wooden boat with a leather sail. These shoes have zero arch support, zero traction, and zero interest in protecting you from puddles. In the rain, they double as bathtubs. In the sun, they heat up like oven trays. The blisters are now just part of your personality. If you're going out, you throw on a cloak. Thick wool, dyed with vegetable matter if you're lucky, or just the natural gray of sad sheep if you're not. It's heavy, water-resistant-ish, and smells like wet barn. It keeps you warm, though, and hides your lice-infested tunic from judgmental eyes. You glance at yourself in a reflective bucket. Your hair is disheveled, your face is wind-burnt, there's a pimple on your chin that might actually be a plague sore. Kidding, probably. But you're ready. Fashion in the Middle Ages isn't about self-expression. It's about status, practicality, and making sure no one thinks you're trying to dress above your class. That could actually get you fined. Or worse, accused of impersonating a noble, and that's a fast track to the stocks. Colors are a luxury. Peasants wear earth tones, browns, grays, greens, because that's what natural dyes yield. If you show up in bright blue or crimson, you're either royalty or about to be accused of theft. Dyes like indigo and cochineal are expensive imports, and wearing them without permission is basically medieval cosplay with legal consequences. The rich, on the other hand, dress like they're auditioning for a fantasy drama. Long sleeves that drag in the mud, hats shaped like pastries, embroidery so intricate it could bankrupt a small village. Their shoes are pointed, curled, and completely impractical, some so long they need to be tied to the wearer's knees with strings. Fashion over function? Medieval nobles invented it. But don't be fooled, even nobility had their itchy problems. Fancy fabrics like velvet and silk attracted lice just as easily as burlap. Perfume helped, sure, but sometimes nobles just carried perfumed handkerchiefs and sniffed them constantly to block out the reality of everything else. You cross paths with a traveling merchant and immediately notice his feathered cap. Stylish, yes, but mostly there to advertise, "I've been somewhere better than here." You eye his boots with envy. He probably bought them in a city where cobblers actually use tools instead of hopes and prayers. Meanwhile, a local blacksmith walks by shirtless, arms coated in soot and smelling like he bathes in smoke. He nods to you, you nod back. That's as social as fashion commentary gets in this village. The only real compliment anyone gives is, "Still got both shoes, I see." You tug at your sleeve. The seam is unraveling. You'll have to fix it yourself with a bone needle and thread spun from old wool, unless you want to pay the local seamstress, who accepts payments in eggs, honey, or gossip. And you're fresh out of eggs. By midday, the sun is out and your wool tunic has become a medieval sauna. You can't strip down. Public nudity is frowned upon unless it's punishment. And even then, it's more for humiliation than ventilation. Someone jokes that you're dressed like a wandering monk. You laugh, but you're sweating so much that your eyebrows are sliding off your face. A farmer points at your shoes and asks if they're left from the last funeral. You don't answer. You're too busy trying to remember if your armpits are supposed to tingle like that. Evening comes and your outfit is stiff with sweat and dust. Your belt has worn a groove into your waist. You pull off your shoes and inspect the damage. 2 blisters, 1 missing toenail, and what looks suspiciously like trench foot. You undress, fold your clothes carefully, because they are the only ones you own, and hang them near the fire, hoping the smoke will do what soap never could. And as you crawl under your wool blanket, itchy and bruised, you mutter something no medieval tailor ever heard. "I miss sweatpants." You haven't even had breakfast yet, and the struggle's already real. But buckle up, because now it's time to enjoy the communal toilet experience. Forget clean tiles, automatic flushes, or scented soaps. You're heading to the latrine pit, and no, it's not optional. You shuffle through the yard, following your host, a broad-shouldered peasant who doesn't seem to notice the stench that hits your nose like a slap. The communal latrine is basically a long wooden plank perched over a trench with a few holes cut out. There's zero privacy. A curtain? Please! You're lucky there's a plank at all, and not just a tree stump. You perch nervously, trying to balance as your backside hovers precariously over a buzzing cesspit of filth. You don't want to look down, but your nose confirms that what's down there hasn't been emptied in weeks. The buzzing? Flies, of course. It's like they're hosting a party down there, and you're the entertainment. This is where you first truly appreciate the miracle of modern plumbing. In medieval towns, latrines were often communal and strategically placed near streams because everything, quite literally, flowed downstream, including disease. Historians still argue whether open trench systems were more common than cesspits in urban areas. But either way, sanitation wasn't the strong suit of the era. And don't even ask about toilet paper. You reach for what's available: moss, straw, or, if you're feeling lucky, a frayed piece of linen. But not before checking for thorns or beetles. The last thing you need is a medieval bug bite somewhere unmentionable. You manage to finish your business without tumbling in, but just barely. You wipe your hands on your tunic, which is disgusting but better than nothing, and step outside, gasping for fresh air like a man rescued from a sewer. And here's the kicker: you're not even sure this is the worst part of your day. Now that you've dealt with the bathroom horrors, it's time to help with one of the most dreaded daily chores: collecting water. There's no tap, no sink, just a bucket, your 2 feet, and a well that's a decent walk away. Carrying water was typically a woman's job in many medieval communities, especially in peasant villages. But since you're the guest here, and let's face it, not particularly helpful yet, They hand you a wooden bucket and give you directions that sound suspiciously vague. You trudge toward the well, passing muddy paths, curious chickens, and a kid throwing stones at a fence post. Every step sloshes the already half-full bucket you started with, and your shoes, still damp from your morning bath, start squelching with each step. At the well, you lower the bucket using a creaky wooden pulley, trying to avoid splashing your tunic. When the bucket hits the water, it feels like a triumph. Until you realize pulling it back up requires actual muscle. You're sweating within minutes, biceps screaming, trying to act like it's fine. It's not. It's the opposite of fine. Water retrieved, you now face the return hike. With a sloshing, heavy bucket, you make your way back, only to trip slightly on a rock and spill about half of it. Classic! No one even bats an eye when you return. The family's too busy gutting a fish for lunch. You set the bucket down, arm aching, and collapse on the nearest log. By now, you might be wondering, how did people survive like this every day? The truth is, they didn't always. Poor sanitation, waterborne illnesses, and contaminated food were constant threats. Typhoid and dysentery could rip through a village faster than a knight on horseback. And hand-washing? Let's just say it wasn't a habit yet. Soap was expensive, and most peasants didn't bathe more than once every few weeks, if that. One quirky exception: some monasteries were known to take cleanliness more seriously. Certain Benedictine orders had hand-washing rituals before meals, though whether the water was clean is anyone's guess. Still, you've technically survived your first few hours. It's a low bar, but we're celebrating small victories here. You hear the clang of a distant bell, a signal that the village priest is calling people to Mass. Great! Another social obligation, and you were hoping for a nap. And as you finally stagger through the heavy gates into the outskirts of the village proper, the smell hits you like a battering ram. An acrid cocktail of dung, stale ale, wet thatch, and the metallic bite of blood from the butcher's stall. You gag, but no one else seems to notice. To them, it's the perfume of daily life. Children dart between you and the muddy livestock, barefoot and coated in grime. One of them laughs, tossing a lump of sod in your direction, while a woman scolds him in harsh, clipped Middle English. You barely understand a word. This isn't Shakespearean or anything close to modern. It's a tangled dialect, thick with Norse, Norman French, and guttural Old English. You try to respond with a polite hello, but your accent sounds alien. She squints at you suspiciously, her eyes narrowing like she's wondering if you're cursed or simply daft. You step aside, nearly tumbling into a pig wallow, then regain your footing. You're hungry. So you do what you do in the modern world: look for food. There's no market square like you'd imagined, no cheery vendor offering fruit in woven baskets. Instead, there's a butcher hacking apart a pig carcass with a rusting cleaver, his apron dark with blood and flies buzzing like tiny vultures. A few rough wooden stalls nearby offer barley bread, dried peas, and something that looks like a suspiciously gray stew. You reach into your pocket, forgetting there's no wallet, no debit card, no currency that would mean anything here. And even if you had silver pennies, you'd likely overpay or be cheated. The locals always know a fool when they see one. A man notices you hesitating near the bread stall. His face is weathered like old leather, and his eyes glint with interest. Not friendly interest, opportunistic interest. He sidles over, speaks something you don't fully catch, and gestures at your cloak. Then he touches your sleeve and tugs. Before you can react, he's trying to barter your clothes. To him, your strange fabric and stitching are worth more than coin. To you, it's your only protection from the chill. You shake your head and back away, but now you've attracted attention. Other eyes are watching. Strangers don't come here, and if they do, they're either rich, stupid, or mad. You slip into a side lane, heart pounding, realizing suddenly that medieval people don't think like you. They don't care if you're lost or hungry or scared. Charity is rare. Fear of outsiders is common, and superstition runs rampant. With your odd speech and foreign clothes, someone might suspect you of being a spy, or worse, a witch. The alley reeks worse than the main street. Rotten fish bones, moldy straw, and something unnameable squelch under your boots. You lean against a timber post, but it's sticky with something foul. Overhead, a woman tosses out a basin of gray water, narrowly missing your head. You yelp and dart aside, your foot slipping into a trench of human waste. This, you realize with horror, is the sewer. A shallow channel running through the street, fed by every household's chamber pots and garbage. You're gagging again. You've seen medieval movies, but they never prepare you for the stench or the ever-present feeling of grime clinging to your skin. You try to remember where you are, what time this is. Maybe the 1300s? Plague century. Great. You check your arm as though expecting a bubonic boil to sprout instantly. Your stomach twists again, not from infection, but hunger. You weigh your options. Starve, beg, or steal. You spot a crust of bread left on a windowsill, probably too stale for the family inside. You hesitate. Then you reach, and just as your fingers brush the edge, a hand closes on your wrist, strong, calloused, angry. The baker has caught you. He shouts, calling out to nearby men, and now they're all yelling, "Thief! Vagrant! Devilkin!" You stammer in protest, but no one listens. Someone throws a stone, hitting your shoulder. Someone else swings a stick, clipping your ribs. You run. You don't know how you manage it, but you sprint through the muck and shouting voices, ducking into another street and weaving through low-slung cottages. Your heart is pounding, lungs on fire. You've never felt more alone. No phone, no police, no friends, just fear. When you finally collapse behind a cart loaded with hay, panting and sore, you're shaking. This isn't a fun trip to the past. This is survival. Every moment you exist here, you are vulnerable to disease, violence, suspicion, hunger. You don't belong, and the world knows it. And yet, as you lie there catching your breath, you hear something. A lute, faint and sweet, strumming a tune in a nearby inn. Laughter rises. A child sings off-key. The scent of roasting meat drifts through the air. There's joy here, somehow, among all the filth and fear. You press your back to the wooden cart and close your eyes. One thing is clear. You wouldn't last a day in the Middle Ages, but for now, you've lasted an hour. Just 14 more to go. The monk's words linger in the air. Perhaps you are meant to change. You don't answer right away. You can't. Not because you don't want to, but because something inside you is shifting, like a locked gate slowly creaking open. You stare at your hands, so out of place here, so soft and uncalloused, and then at his, weathered, dirt-streaked, scarred from years of use. They are both human, and yet they speak of two different lives. "You would teach me?" you ask. He nods. Not just herbs, the rhythm of this life. It's brutal, yes, but also sacred. Every hour has its bell, every season its duty, and every soul its trial. You're not sure if it's the hunger still curling in your gut or the aftershock of fear from the night before, but tears prick your eyes. You blink them away. You've spent the past day running from everything this time has thrown at you: filth, fear, violence, suspicion. And now here, in this silent garden, you're being offered the chance to stand still and listen. And maybe, just maybe, learn. He sees your hesitation and does not press. Instead, he rises and beckons you toward the small shed behind the chapel. Inside are wooden shelves lined with bundles of dried plants, sealed jars, wax tablets etched with rough Latin, and tools that looked both surgical and terrifying: hooks, blades, bone needles. A low cot sits in one corner. He points to it. If you stay, that is yours. No fire, just wool and God. You nod slowly, taking in the simplicity. You're used to mattresses and memory foam, but last night a wooden bench with a wool blanket felt like heaven. Maybe you could adjust. Maybe. The rest of the day passes in quiet labor. He teaches you to identify herbs by scent, how to tell the difference between healing balm and poison. You bruise leaves between your fingers, your nose overwhelmed by earthy oils. You help carry water from the well, heavy, sloshing buckets that make your arms tremble. You pick stones from the garden rows until your knees ache. And yet with every task, something inside you settles. There's no phone buzzing, no lights flashing, no screens stealing your attention. Just hands, breath, and the weight of the present. Painfully real, awfully honest, but real. By afternoon, a woman arrives, an old peasant with a deep cough and skin like folded parchment. She speaks in that tangled dialect again, but the monk listens patiently. He takes her hand, presses fingers to her wrist, feels her brow. You stand aside, unsure if you should help, but then he nods toward mortar and pestle. Garlic, honey, and thyme, he says. You prepare, I bless. You do as you're told, hands clumsy but focused. She watches you warily, and when she coughs again, a hint of red splatters the cloth at her mouth. Consumption, maybe. You remember something from school, a medieval death sentence. But here the monk doesn't give up. He offers prayer, warmth, poultice, and patience. You wonder if that's all most people had in this time: patience and prayer. When she leaves, he doesn't speak for a long while. You think about the countless others who never had help, who died alone in huts, in fields, on roads. You think of the phrase, the Dark Ages, and how unfairly that shadow covers the human lives that burned within it. You are exhausted by evening. Your hands are stained, your clothes still damp, your back sore from unfamiliar labor, but there's a quiet satisfaction in your bones that you've never quite felt before. You didn't survive this day by running. You survived by learning, by being useful. You sit beside the monk as the sun sinks, casting gold across the distant hills. A bell chimes somewhere, distant, slow, perhaps from a neighboring monastery or manor. A reminder that time in this world moves by sound and light, not numbers and screens. The monk breaks the silence. Do you still wish to go back? You don't answer right away. You think of hot showers, warm food, electricity, music, comfort, safety, all of it taken for granted. But then you also think of the silence here, the honesty of labor, the weight of purpose in every small act. I don't know, you finally say. He nods. Then you are ready to begin. You sleep in the cot that night, wrapped in scratchy wool, your hands curled against your chest like a child's. The night is cold, but you are not. In your dream, you walk down the same muddy road as before, but this time no one throws stones, no one yells. They nod as you pass. Someone hands you a loaf of bread. A child tugs your sleeve and smiles. And when you look down at your hands, they are dirty, calloused, belonging. When you wake, the sky is still a deep blue-gray, the kind of color that only exists in the moments before dawn. The air is sharp, laced with dew and chimney smoke, and your breath fogs in faint clouds above your lips. Your muscles ache from the unfamiliar bed, but it's a clean ache, earned, not inflicted. You rise quietly. The monk is already up, tending to the brazier with slow, practiced movements. He nods as you approach, but doesn't speak. Words are not always necessary here. The silence between actions carries meaning of its own. He hands you a small wooden pail and gestures toward the path. You understand. Fetch water from the well again. You wrap your cloak tighter around your shoulders and head out into the waking world. The village is stirring. A dog barks in the distance. A rooster crows. Smoke curls lazily from the chimneys of thatched cottages, and you can hear the clatter of someone chopping wood. There's no rush, no traffic, no alarms, but the day begins early, and everyone has their place within it. At the well, a woman you don't recognize is already there. She has a child strapped to her back and a tired kindness in her eyes. She glances at you, puzzled for a moment, then nods. You nod back. And then, without thinking, you speak. "God give you good day," you say, fumbling through the archaic phrase you heard yesterday. Her eyes widen, then soften. "And thee, stranger." You feel a strange warmth bloom in your chest. It's the first time someone in this world hasn't looked at you like you were a threat. You draw your water and return. The monk is laying out tools, linen strips, clean blades, beeswax, herbs. A man is coming, a wound on his leg. He stepped on iron. It has blackened. You blink. Infection? He nods grimly. Likely. You help prepare a poultice, crushing garlic and marigold petals with a heavy pestle. The smell is pungent but oddly comforting. You heat water, fold cloth, light a rush lamp. Your hands move faster now, less clumsy. You're beginning to anticipate what's needed. When the injured man arrives, you don't flinch. His leg is swollen, red and purple with angry veins. He bites down on a stick as the monk cleans the wound. The smell is awful, the pain worse, but you hold the man's arm, speak soft words, press the cloth to his brow. He grips your hand so hard your knuckles crack. Afterward, the monk breathes a quiet prayer. If the rot doesn't spread by tomorrow, he may keep the leg. You nod, silently shaken. In your world, this might have been a quick trip to the ER. Here, it's a test of fate and faith. As the day wears on, the tasks become a rhythm. Not easy, but predictable. You sweep the chapel. You clean the tools. You recite your first Latin prayer under your breath, awkwardly, but with conviction. The monk chuckles once when you mispronounce a word that changes peace into fish, but he corrects you gently. At midday, a traveler arrives at the chapel's door. A lean man in a patched tunic, face sun-darkened from the road. He carries a pilgrim's badge and a staff carved with crosses. The monk greets him as if he's been expected all along. They speak in low tones over bread and ale, and you catch only fragments. Plague in the west, knights raiding the coast, famine in the borderlands. Your stomach tightens. The world beyond this village is a rough, raw beast. War, disease, hunger, these aren't distant possibilities. They are present realities. You ask the monk that night, how do people live like this, knowing danger could come at any time? He looks at you for a long while, then replies, because there is no other choice, because they must. You nod slowly. It's the most honest answer you've heard. And suddenly, you realize something strange. For the first time since you arrived, you're not desperate to leave. The terror has dulled into alertness. The discomfort has become endurance. The fear of not surviving the day has turned into the desire to face the next one better. You don't know how long you've been here. Time bends without clocks or calendars. You only know you've changed. Your hands are dirtier. Your back is stronger. Your silence is deeper. That night, you step outside the chapel and look up. The stars gleam like cold fire. You trace constellations with your eyes, wondering how many others, centuries before you, stood on this very soil, wishing on the same lights. You close your eyes and whisper, "I'm still here." And the wind answers softly through the trees. Morning comes not with alarms or glowing screens, but with the slow, golden wash of light seeping through the cracks in the wooden shutters. You wake before the bell, already half-dressed, your body now responding to the rhythm of this world without resistance. There's something holy in this quiet awakening. No rush, no chaos, just the promise of usefulness. You dress and step outside before the monk calls you. The grass is wet beneath your feet, the air is cool and smells of wood smoke and damp soil. In the garden, dew clings to the leaves like pearls, and a small bird flits past, chasing light between the branches. The land, for all its hardships, still knows beauty. You begin the morning tasks without being asked. Water first, then sweeping the stones. You gather wood. You stoke the brazier. These things would have once annoyed you, pointless chores, small inconveniences, but now they feel necessary, sacred even. The monk joins you, surprised but pleased. The body remembers the wheel, he says. Once it is turned a few times, the hands follow. You eat a simple breakfast of pottage, barley and onion, a bit of wild garlic. You miss toast, you miss tea, but you don't say it. You don't even crave it anymore the way you used to. Not in the same way. Later, he gives you your first independent task. Take this solve to the potter's wife, he says, handing you a wax-sealed jar. She's had pain in her joints. Rub it into her knees and make sure she rests them. You nod and tuck it into your pouch. You're nervous. You haven't ventured alone since that first terrifying flight through the village. But now, dressed more like them, with hands stained from labor and speech softened by practice, you feel different. Less like an outsider. The walk through the village is quiet. The potter's wife lives on the far end, near the stream. As you pass others, you catch their eyes. Some still glance twice, but some nod. A few even greet you. When you arrive, the potter's wife is sitting in a low stool by her door, shelling beans into a wide basket. Her hands are worn, twisted with age, but her eyes are sharp. She's the monk's helper, she says without question. You nod. She gestures toward her legs. Let's see if your hands are steadier than his. You kneel, open the jar and rub the solve into her aching joints. She winces at first, then sighs. You've got warm hands, she mutters. As you work, she talks. About her sons. About the plague years ago. About her husband's kiln. About the day a bear came down from the woods and frightened the whole village. You listen, not just because you should, but because it's real. These aren't stories told for entertainment. They're the fabric of this time, woven in hardship, humor, and endurance. She presses a boiled egg into your hand as you leave. You'll need strength. The world isn't kind to the soft. You thank her, and as you walk back, you realize something profound. You're no longer surviving hour to hour. You're part of something. Not fully, not forever, but enough that it matters. When you return, the monk nods at the egg in your hand. A gift? You nod. She talks too much, he adds, smiling faintly. You spend the afternoon in the graveyard behind the chapel, clearing ivy from the stones. Some are so old, the names have vanished, worn down by centuries of wind and rain. You pause at one, run your fingers over the lichen-stained surface. Who were they? A child? A farmer? A healer like you're becoming? The monk joins you and rests a hand on the stone. The dead remember, he says. They speak through the land, through us. That's why we tend them. You look up. Do you think I'm meant to stay here? He shrugs gently. Perhaps not, but you are meant to know it, to carry it forward, even if you leave. You are quiet for a long time. Then you ask the question that's been building in you since the first night you arrived. Is there a way back? He doesn't answer. Instead, he leads you to the chapel. Together, you light candles for the sick, for the dead, for those lost in storms of time. The glow is soft and trembling. Then he speaks, voice low and ancient. Some gates only open once. You don't ask if yours will open again. That night you dream of your world. But it's different. Quieter. Slower. You walk streets without rushing. You touch leaves without distraction. You eat with both hands free. You smile at strangers. And in your bag, you carry a small jar of salve. In the dream, no one knows what it is. But you do. And it matters. You're out of breath, but the panic coursing through your veins gives you wings. You scramble past the empty market square, its stalls overturned, baskets trampled, produce strewn like a battlefield's leftovers. A few dogs fight over a half-eaten loaf of bread, growling low. The scent of blood lingers in the air. You duck into a nearby stable, pressing your back to the rough wood, praying your gasping breath doesn't give you away. Outside, the rhythmic clank of armored boots on cobblestones grows louder. Someone shouts in a guttural dialect you don't understand. Then silence. A long, crushing silence. You clutch your chest. Your heart pounds so hard you're sure they'll hear it. Just when you think the coast might be clear, a stable hand appears. Skinny, no older than you, with straw in his hair and terror in his eyes. He gestures wildly. Out the back! Now! You don't hesitate. You follow him through manure and mud, dodging frightened horses. One kicks at its stall door, spooked by the noise, and you nearly lose your footing. The stable boy lifts a hatch behind a hay bale. A tunnel, dark, narrow, and reeking of damp rot. You squeeze in, heart in your throat, knees scraping stone as you crawl forward, trying not to think about the rats that surely share this path. The tunnel spits you out behind the blacksmith's forge. It's in ruins now, the fire still glowing dimly beneath collapsed beams. You don't linger. The forest is close. You can see it now, just past the town's edge. A thicket of twisted trunks and brambles, wild and foreboding, but offering something you haven't had all day. A chance. You dash for it. Behind you, a scream pierces the air. Someone caught, or worse. You don't turn around. You can't. You reach the tree line and dive into the underbrush. Branches claw at your face and clothes. Roots threaten to twist your ankles with every step, but you keep going, deeper and deeper until the sounds of the burning village fade into a distant nightmare. Only now do you allow yourself to slow down. Your legs tremble, your chest heaves, and your entire body aches. You collapse beside a fallen log, hidden beneath a canopy of green. The silence here is almost cruel. The world has changed, and you're not sure how or if you belong in it anymore. Eventually, as the sun begins to sink, a flicker of movement catches your eye. A figure, hooded, slow, careful, moves through the trees. You stiffen, ready to bolt again. But then you see the emblem on their belt, a small leather pouch embroidered with a blue leaf, the symbol of the nearby monastery. They're a healer. You rise from the undergrowth, cautiously revealing yourself. The figure startles, then softens. "Another one?" they murmur. "Come, you're safe for now." You follow them. What choice do you have? The path winds uphill, and though every step is agony, the thought of shelter, of water, food, kindness, pulls you onward. At the crest of the hill, through a gap in the trees, you finally see it. The monastery. Its walls are high, its roof slate gray and intact, unburnt. A bell sounds somewhere in the distance. You don't know what tomorrow holds or if the chaos will follow you here, but you do know one thing. You survived. For now. The monastery gates creak open with the sound of rust and age, not urgency. There is no panic here, no screaming, no fire, just stillness. A world removed from the ruin you fled. The robed figure leads you through a narrow stone archway and into a courtyard of flagstones worn smooth by centuries of feet. A few monks glance up from their work, one trimming herbs in a garden bed, another carrying a basket of bread. Their faces are wary but not unkind. They've seen people like you before, lost, broken, survivors. Inside, the air is cooler. The corridors are lined with frescoes, faded saints and battles you don't recognize. Candles flicker in carved niches, and the scent of beeswax, old parchment, and lavender oil fills your nose. It almost feels safe. Almost. You're brought to an infirmary. Wooden shelves bear jars of dried flowers and bitter-smelling salves. The healer presses you gently onto a bench, then hands you a clay cup. It's warm, mint and honey. Your hands tremble as you sip. "You were lucky," the healer murmurs while cleaning the scratches on your face. "Most don't make it this far." You nod, unable to speak. Guilt gnaws at your stomach. You made it. Others didn't. After you're treated, another monk shows you to a narrow cell with a straw mattress and a woolen blanket. He doesn't ask your name. Here, names don't seem to matter much, only the fact that you're still breathing. Days pass. Time here doesn't flow like it did in the village. It drips slowly, measured by the bells that toll at dawn, midday, vespers, and dusk. You learn their rhythm, when to wake, when to eat, when to pray, even if you're not sure who you're praying to anymore. You're given chores, gathering herbs, cleaning floors, helping prepare food for the sick. At first your hands shake so badly you drop nearly everything you touch. But no one yells, no one strikes you. There's only quiet correction, the way a parent might guide a child. In the silence, you begin to feel something you haven't known in weeks: worth. You discover stories in the scriptorium, rows of manuscripts being copied letter by monks with aching backs and inky fingers. One of them lets you read an old folio filled with tales of distant lands, dragons, and forgotten kings. You lose yourself in the words, escaping once more, but this time into wonder, not fear. At night, you lie awake listening to the wind rattle the shutters. Your body is healing, but your mind still replays that day. The screams, the flames, the girl who tripped, the man in the alley. Their faces blur, but your shame doesn't. Could you have helped them? Should you have? And then one morning the abbot summons you. His chamber smells of incense and damp wood. He gestures for you to sit. For a while he says nothing. Then, gently, "You've seen the world as it truly is, cruel, unfair, but you're still here. That means something. So I ask you, what will you do now?" You don't know how to answer. You thought survival was the end goal, but now it feels like just the beginning. He nods, seeing the confusion in your eyes. He says there are many paths. You can stay here, live quietly, heal. Or you can go back into the world, help others, speak truth, fight for those who cannot. But know this, doing nothing is also a choice. You leave the chamber with a weight in your chest and a seed of purpose buried deep inside you. Another week passes, then another. You begin to feel stronger. You laugh once, just once, and the sound surprises you. You'd forgotten it was even possible. Then one day a messenger arrives at the monastery gates. He carries news. The village to the west has also been attacked. Survivors are pouring into the hills. Some are injured. Some are children. That night you can't sleep. You stare at the wooden ceiling and think of the healer who saved you, of the books that comforted you, of the abbot's words. You rise before dawn, wash your face, put on a clean tunic. Then you walk to the gates and ask for a satchel of herbs, water, and a piece of bread. You say, "I'm going, to help." The monk at the gate hesitates. Then he nods and hands you a staff for walking. He says, "May your path be safe." You step beyond the monastery walls. The world hasn't changed. It's still cruel, still broken, but you're not the same as you were. You walk toward the smoke on the horizon, not away from it. Because now you have purpose. You've seen what horror does to the helpless, and you've survived it. And maybe, just maybe, that means you are meant to do something more than just run. You don't look back.